On this Sunday night, America's unprecedented week ahead. Trump ready for battle as the former U.S. president gets set to surrender to authorities.
He's someone who's going to be ready for this fight. We're ready for this fight.
Plus, security ramps up as Trump's base rolls into town. The bomb attack and the bloody aftermath at a St. Petersburg cafe that killed a popular pro-Russian blogger. Turbulent times, why air travel is on the federal government's radar.
The airports need money, lots of it.
How the cost of your next flight is set to soar. And mission to the moon.
We're about to announce which one of them is going to go to the moon. I mean, it's historic.
We're one-on-one with Canada's best-known astronaut ahead of tomorrow's Artemis 2 announcement.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. First, to the calm before the unprecedented political storm, as anticipation builds up ahead of Donald Trump's arraignment, coming days after Trump was indicted, marking the first time in American history that a former president has faced criminal charges. Trump is expected to fly in a private plane to New York tomorrow before he surrenders to authorities in Manhattan on Tuesday. Trump's lawyer says the former president will fight any charges related to those hush money payments vigorously.
He's gearing up for a battle. This is something that obviously we believe is a political persecution, and he's someone who's going to be ready for this fight.
Trump announced today that he will speak from his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida following his first hearing. Reggie Cecchini has our top story tonight.
There is no precedent for how this arraignment will unfold, and while it will be carefully choreographed, it will also be making history with each step. Former President Donald Trump will remain at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida until Monday, when he's then expected to fly to New York and overnight at his residence in Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan, before traveling by Secret Service motorcade to the courthouse on Tuesday morning, a building already behind layers of security fencing and gates. The charges Trump faces, reported to be in the dozens, are still unknown, but there is a push by large media outlets in the U.S. to have them unsealed ahead of time, along with a similar move to allow cameras inside the courthouse to capture Trump's arrival. He is expected to plead not guilty, and while he will be processed, it's unclear if a mugshot will be taken. The former president is rallying support both within his base and with his Republican allies who argue this is nothing more than a witch hunt, phrasing Trump has used for years amid attempts by Democrats to go after perceived wrongdoing. Legal experts, however, say while there may be difficulties with the New York Attorney General pursuing federal charges, claims from within Trump's inner circle that this is a partisan effort appear unfounded.
Despite all the noise, there's no evidence suggesting that this is a political prosecution. There's no evidence suggesting that there are other people who committed similar offenses that Manhattan prosecutors decided not to prosecute.
Trump is using this indictment to his advantage, with his campaign claiming it's raised $4 million in the last several days. Reggie Cecchini, Global News, Washington.
The death toll is growing in the wake of those powerful tornadoes that carved a path of destruction across several U.S. states on Friday night. At least 26 people are now known to have died. The White House confirmed today that it will provide federal resources, including financial assistance, to support ongoing recovery efforts after President Joe Biden's disaster declaration. Residents in the 7 southern and Midwestern states that were hit hard are reeling as they begin the cleanup, sifting through what's left of their homes and wider communities. More than 60 tornadoes were recorded in one night, including a major twister that tore through Arkansas's capital of Little Rock. A prominent Russian military blogger has been killed in an explosion in St. Petersburg. Vladlen Tatarsky has died, and at least 25 others were injured in the blast this afternoon. Tatarsky was a strong supporter of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Last year, he said that Russia will defeat everyone, kill everyone, and rob everyone. Redmond Shannon reports.
Just before he was killed, someone handed Vladlen Tatarsky a statue as a gift. Russian media is reporting that the bomb was hidden inside the statue. Moments later, a video purportedly shows the explosion from outside the St. Petersburg cafe. Inside, a bloody aftermath that injured 24 but only killed Tatarsky. He was a Russian military blogger who strongly supported the Kremlin's invasions of Ukraine. Tatarsky, whose real name was Maxim Fomin, was born in Soviet Ukraine in 1982. When President Vladimir Putin held a ceremony to annex 4 regions of Ukraine last year, including Tatarsky's birthplace of Donetsk, he recorded a selfie video at the Kremlin. He said, "We will defeat everyone, we will kill everyone, we will rob everyone, just as we like." Russian authorities are calling the blast terrorism, with one Kremlin-backed official in Ukraine already blaming Kyiv. An advisor to Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky is framing it as Russian domestic terrorism. Tatarsky had been critical of Russian military commanders as the war dragged into a second year. A local media outlet in St. Petersburg says the bombed cafe was previously owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin. He is the head of the Wagner mercenary group fighting for Russia in Ukraine. The killing comes 7 months after a Moscow car bomb killed Daria Dugina, the daughter of a prominent Russian nationalist, a killing that Russia blamed on Ukraine, but that Kyiv also denied. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Now to the U.S.-Canada border in southern Quebec. Police have identified 2 of 8 bodies recovered from the St. Lawrence River following last week's boat tragedy as they continue to search for a man that is still missing. Officials in Akwesasne identified 2 family members of Romanian descent, a woman and a man, both 28 years old. The man was carrying the Canadian passports of his 2 children. The identities of 4 Indian nationals have not yet been released. Police have intensified their search for Akwesasne resident 30-year-old Casey Oakes, who's considered a person of interest. He was last seen on Wednesday night operating a boat found next to the bodies. Police believe the 2 families were trying to cross into the U.S. illegally from Canada when their boat capsized in stormy weather on Wednesday night. There is an alarming trend rising in Canadian cities. Seemingly random and sometimes deadly attacks in transit that have taken the headlines in cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Commuters across the country are concerned for their safety. Julia Foy reports on what could be driving this rash in violence.
A sunny Saturday morning bus ride in Surrey, BC was shattered when a stranger slashed the neck of a passenger with a large kitchen knife. The victim was rushed into surgery and is expected to survive. A suspect is in custody, facing possible charges of attempted murder. But investigators are still searching for answers on why this happened. One criminology expert has a theory.
People are worried, they're afraid, they feel isolated. They're carrying knives either because they're angry or they're fearful.
The Surrey assault comes just a week after 16-year-old Gabriel Magalis was stabbed to death as he waited in a Toronto transit station.
When I saw the 2 policemen there, I just threw myself here on the floor and I just looked at them. I was like, tell me, I know what happened, just say it.
Police believe Gabriel's attack was unprovoked. 22-year-old Jordan O'Brien Tobin is charged with first-degree murder. Morden suspects that people who attack others are suffering from mental health issues. They may be attracted to negative social media streams, and this can lead some to believe the world is destabilized, which can steal their hope for a better future.
People are getting knifed over accidentally bumping into somebody else or telling teenagers to stop being brats, throwing stuff around. That's a very bad sign in a society.
Concerns about the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the rising cost of living are raised as issues that have affected the public's mental health. But Morden says there is a way to help.
As a society, in all regards, our schools, our churches, our community groups, our social networks, we need to be encouraging one another to go out and visit with other people, do things out of our houses.
And a bit of advice for everyone.
Turn off the computer or put down the cell phone and go out and do something with other people.
Julia Foy, Global News.
Last year's summer travel season was frustrating. This one may be even more expensive. Coming up, how much airport fees are expected to rise for your next flight. Canadian swimming sensation Summer McIntosh is making waves at the National Swimming Trials. And now get this, she's only 16, but she powered her way to a world record time in the world's 400-meter individual medley on Saturday. And then earlier in the week, she set a new world best in the women's 400-meter freestyle. McIntosh is the first swimmer ever to hold world records for both races at the same time. It's been an extremely turbulent time for airlines and passengers, but the federal government has revealed it has air travel on its radar. Last week, Ottawa laid out a plan in its federal budget to speed up airport security and screening times to reduce those lengthy flight delays exacerbated by COVID-19. Mackenzie Gray looks at the problems and what Ottawa is now promising.
After a year full of disastrous delays at airports across the country, the Liberals are trying to avoid the same fate for the upcoming summer travel season. In the recent budget, the feds proposed $1.8 billion over 5 years to help the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority improve passenger screening and strengthen security measures at airports, one of the key issues in last year's delays.
Our government presented its plan to build a strong middle class, an affordable economy, and a healthy future.
The cash could be a start to stabilize Canadian air travel.
The airports need money, lots of it, a lot more than what is in this budget in order to fix the problem.
And that's where passengers come in to help fix those problems. With the feds announcing for the first time in 13 years, airport fees will increase. For a one-way domestic flight, airport levies are jumping to $9.94. For international travel, the cost will soar to over $35. It's an average increase of 33%.
The airports seem to have, put a lot of money on the front, talking to customers, not much in the back, and I think that's where it's falling apart.
But getting through security quickly is little solace to passengers if their flight is delayed or canceled. The budget reiterated an earlier pledge from the transport minister to change the airline passenger bill of rights, which outlines compensation the airlines must pay when there are flight interruptions. But carriers often use loopholes to avoid paying their customers.
The current system is not simply unfair to passengers, but it is also unworkable.
The NDP have proposed changes to the Bill of Rights to align Canadian regulations with the European Union.
The Liberals have had 3 years to get this right. When the regulations came out in 2019, they promised they were going to be the best in the world, and yet we see other jurisdictions like the European Union who have far stronger air passenger protections than we do.
The Canadian Transportation Agency, which adjudicates disputes between passengers and airlines, says they have a backlog of over 40,000 complaints, and they warn it could take years to get through. Farah?
And lots of frustration for consumers in that time. Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mackenzie. Ahead, triple election night in Europe. The country's going to the polls, plus why Canada is paying close attention.
Egli desidera che ci prendiamo cura dei fratelli.
Pope Francis leads Palm Sunday Mass in St. Peter's Square today, only hours after leaving the hospital where he was treated for severe bronchitis. The 86-year-old pontiff opened the Mass with a weak and slightly breathless voice and then thanked people for their participation and prayers, which intensified these past few days while he was recovering in Rome. Elsewhere in Europe, unity was on the ballot in Finland, Bulgaria, and Montenegro tonight, which the Trudeau government argues is crucial for Canadian security and prosperity. And there's now already a change to the political landscape in 2 of those countries, because in Finland and Montenegro, the incumbents lost. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, walks us through what's at stake.
The partnership between Canada and the EU is stronger than ever.
The Trudeau government wants a united Europe for Canada's security and prosperity. But maintaining European unity in the face of Russian aggression is no easy thing.
The very values that unite us are challenged today like never before.
Indeed, in 3 countries at Europe's edge, hundreds of thousands of voters cast ballots Sunday for some candidates who reject a pan-European vision and for others that are openly sympathetic to Russia. In Finland, the government of Social Democrat Sanna Marin fell in a tight 3-way race. A center-right party won the most seats, but the even righter-leaning populist Finns party now holds the balance of power, and it favors pulling back from the European Union.
Well, of course, we are going to defend our goals and our values, but there is only a coalition government possible in Finland, so it's always a compromise.
Montenegro is already a NATO member, but the long-serving pro-Western incumbent, President Milo Đukanović, was defeated after 32 years in power. The new president, Jakov Milatović, is supported by some pro-Russian parties, even though he favors European Union membership.
I believe that we are entering a new era for Montenegro, an era for a better, more just, more wealthy, as well as more democratic Montenegro, European Montenegro.
And in Bulgaria, pro-Western parties won the most votes, but a populist and pro-Russian party finished third. It increased its standing and its influence in that country's politics. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
The excitement surrounding tomorrow's Artemis 2 announcement. Who will be the next Canadian heading to space? We're one-on-one with retired astronaut Chris Hadfield next. In less than 24 hours, we will learn the Artemis 2 crew of 4 astronauts scheduled to fly around the moon next year. The first crewed mission of its kind in half a century, and one will be a Canadian, picked from the country's pool of 4 active astronauts that work alongside NASA in Houston. The contenders are Joshua Kutrick from Alberta, a Canadian fighter pilot recruited by the Canadian Space Agency, Jeremy Hansen from Ontario, who became a pilot at age 17 and is the first Canadian in charge of training astronaut candidates at NASA, Jennifer Sidney Gibbons from Alberta, the youngest of the group, and a former lecturer at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and a familiar face, Quebec's David Saint-Jacques, who flew to the ISS in the longest Canadian space mission to date. Joining me now to talk about this upcoming announcement is retired Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield, who's also a busy author lately. He's working on a new thriller, a Cold War thriller called The Defector. It's coming out later on this year. As if being an astronaut wasn't enough, Mr. Hadfield, thanks so much for joining us. I want to get right to it. Tomorrow, we're going to hear this announcement. You were involved in selecting these 4 names, and I don't think you're going to give me who you think is best, but let me ask you this. What is NASA and what is the Canadian Space Agency looking for this specific role?
Those 4 names you just mentioned, those are some terrific Canadians, some amazingly accomplished and driven and hardworking Canadian astronauts who have been serving the country for a long time. So I am just so excited that we're about to announce which one of them is going to go to the moon. I mean, it's historic. No one has ever left Earth orbit except an American. What we're looking for, of course, is what those 4 astronauts have, and that is deep technical competence, a great ability to deal with problems and solve them and make things work, a real burning desire to work at this thing. It's going to take years of work, and they're going to have to take a tremendous risk to climb on board that enormous rocket ship that's only ever flown once in history and take that little spaceship all the way around the moon and back. And then the last thing I think is a great ability to work during their entire life, trusting their lives and having the skills to be trusted with other people's lives in close proximity for decades as they get ready for a flight like this. So we've got the right people. Any of the 4 of them can do it, but tomorrow we're going to find out which one.
It's such an exciting announcement because these astronauts will also travel faster than any humans ever have. They'll also be going further from Earth than anyone. So what kind of training will this crew be doing in this mission to prepare for that?
The mission itself, Farah, will be about 10 or 11 days long. And they're going to launch out of Florida. So a large part of their training, of course, is the launch vehicle and all the various things that go wrong during launch and how you can survive it, how you can do different things to overcome those problems. Then they're going to stay in Earth orbit for several days while they check everything out. They make sure all of the systems work, all of the complexities of navigation and all of the life support systems. You know, it's a brand new vehicle and someone needs to do the initial big test flight on it. And then they're going to fire the great big engine that, as you say, will get them faster than anybody's ever gone before so that they can go all the way up to the moon. And it's as if we were throwing a stone so fast that it would go all the way to the moon and then get caught by the moon's gravity and whip around the other side and then fall 400,000 kilometers until it plummets back into the atmosphere. And they have to be able to operate the machine during all of that. And of course, coming back down through the atmosphere where the air slows them down. So it's a huge suite of skills and potential risks that they need to get ready for.
Let's talk about settlement on the moon. Do you think we're going to see humans live on the moon in our lifetimes?
Initially, someone has to take the risk to just show you can get there. But then your technology gets good enough that you can actually start staying longer and longer and really making that part of the whole human experience, the Earth-Moon economic system. So yeah, that's what's going on right now. The early steps towards not just exploration, but permanent human presence and settlement. And that's what this Canadian and their 3 American crewmates are signing up to do. So
I can count that as a yes. In our lifetime, you think this could happen?
Yes. Well, it depends how long you're planning to live, Farah, but I'm sure planning to live long enough to see it. Yeah, that's coming very fast. And of course, it's not just Canada, not just the United States, but there are 77 countries that have space agencies. This is the start of a big international effort, and there'll be some competition in there. So yeah, that's another reason to answer your question, yes.
Oh, sure is exciting. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your insight. Retired Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield. And that's Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Farah Nasser, and on behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us this Sunday. Tonight's Air Canada is this group of cormorants alongside a white pelican in Regina. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.